have a fun idea for you today. This was suggested in the comments of one of my previous videos and the idea intrigued me, so I'm giving it a try. Do you happen to have some big watercolor paper sheets lying around unused? Maybe like me, you purchased some full sheets of watercolor paper with the intent of painting something epic on them, but you've found you just really have a hard time working large, or you're simply too busy to take on big paintings right now, or maybe like me, you've discovered you just really don't enjoy stretching your watercolor paper. Whatever the case, if you have some lighter weight watercolor sheets collecting dust in your storage cabinet, that's not good. That's wasted paper. So what can we do with those big sheets of unused watercolor paper that will encourage us to actually paint on them? This is called a binding machine. If you work in an office, you've probably seen one of these. I bought this one on Amazon for $49.99. It can punch holes and allow you to easily bind paper with these small plastic combs. My idea was, what if I could use all of my big sheets of 140-pound cotton watercolor paper to make my own watercolor journals? I could create any size I wanted, and I'd also have complete freedom to decorate the cover however I wanted. So make sure to watch this until the end because I've crunched the numbers for you so we could see if this method of binding your own watercolor journals will actually save you money versus paying full price for pre-made cotton watercolor journals. I know you're thinking, impossible. She's blonde and an artist. No way does that girl do math. And you're right, I used a calculator. So yeah, here it is. This particular binding machine came with simple instructions. It comes with a box of 100 3/8-inch PVC comb bindings, but if you prefer a larger binding, you can purchase those separately. In the little guidebook, there's a chart showing the comb size and how many sheets you can bind with each size. For this little 3/8-inch comb, it says you can bind 40 to 60 pages of regular printer paper. Now, since I'd be trying to bind heavier weight watercolor paper and cover sheets, I knew I would have to experiment just to see how many this little comb could actually hold. Assembling the machine was super simple. All I had to do was screw the handle on. Included is a little perforated cardboard sheet, which you're supposed to punch at least 6 times in order to get rid of residual oils on the blades and achieve optimum utility prior to using the machine. You can see the paper fix button is adjustable. It's meant to accommodate A4 or A5 sizes, which is a typical letter size sheet of paper, but you can use smaller pages too. My first test was to create a little book using just printer paper. You can see just how easy it is to line up the papers and punch the holes. To attach the comb binding, you place the comb ring on the back side of the comb plate and push the handle back to open the comb ring. You can then place your perforated papers on the comb ring, pull the handle back, and voila, a complete book. I was so excited by how easy this was. Now, before jumping right in, cutting up all my watercolor paper sheets, I wanted to do an experiment to see what thicknesses of materials the binding machine could handle. I thought it would be fun to make some drawing sketchbooks for my kids using some cardstock sheets. For the covers, I'd saved a couple of fun food boxes, a pancakes box, and a gummy bears box. I found it very helpful to have a small paper trimmer. I used this to cut my sheets down to size to match my box covers. I tried punching the Kodiak pancakes box first. Now, unfortunately, the cardboard was just too thick, and the machine really struggled to punch the holes and I couldn't get them lined up straight. I didn't want to damage the machine, so I gave up on this box for a cover. The gummy bear box was not quite as thick, so it actually worked really well. I punched 10 sheets of white cardstock paper and then bound these inside of the gummy bear box cover. I used a scissors to trim the excess PVC comb. Also, be careful! I'm a grown adult and I still managed to slice my finger with the scissors. My daughter was thrilled with the unique little sketchbook. To empty the machine, there's just a little tray on the bottom, almost like a toaster, that catches the punched paper and it's easy to pull out and empty. I made a couple more sketchbooks for my kids. I really liked this 140-pound sparkly double-sided paper for the covers. It feels thick enough to protect your pages, and the sparkles are just really fun. These were from a pack of 30 sheets purchased on Amazon for $17.99. That's about 60 cents a sheet. My daughter wanted to help me with hers, and I was so surprised. It's just really easy, even for a 9-year-old. Okay, enough experimenting. Time to make my first watercolor journal. For my first official watercolor journal made with the binding machine, I pulled out a full-sized sheet of Saunders Waterford 140-pound cotton paper that had been stashed in my supply closet for, I'm guessing, over 2 years. Individual sheets, which are sized 22 by 30 inches, are about the same price in the US across different brands, roughly $11. Saunders sheets are currently $11.30 on Blick's website. I decided to cut the sheet down into 7 by 10 inch pages. Since this is a pretty standard size for watercolor blocks, and it uses most of the sheet with very little waste. Once measured and cut, I ended up with 9 individual pages from the full sheet of watercolor paper. I wanted to preserve as many of those deckled edges as I could. I think it looks so pretty. I cut a front cover using my sparkly thick paper and a chipboard for the back cover, and then I punched and bound them. I did discover, unfortunately, that I could not fit all 9 pages on the small comb. I could only squeeze in 8. No big deal, I do like a nice even number anyway, and I could always use the extra sheet for an individual painting. I really like how this turned out. I know I'm far more likely to use this paper now that it's in a nice tidy journal and the pages are a manageable size. Also, if you make your own covers, you get to decorate them however you like. I had these cute floral stickers that I thought would look really pretty on the cover. I made a second journal, this time punching the holes along the short edge so I'd have a horizontal format. For this one, I used an Arches 140-pound 22 by 30 inch sheet of cold pressed paper, again cut down to 7 by 10 inch pages. You can purchase Arches sheets individually for $11.19 or packs of 5 for $41.25. So, now that you've seen how easy it is to use a binding machine to make your own watercolor journals, you might be wondering, are these handmade journals actually cheaper? I'm going to use 3 popular cotton watercolor journals for price comparison. The Etcher Perfect Sketchbook, size 5 by 8 inches, has 22 sheets and costs $39.99. Price per sheet is $1.81. So that's pretty expensive, but it does have a nice hardbound cover. The Arches Spiral Bound Watercolor Journal, size 6 by 10 inches, has 15 sheets and costs $20.70. That averages $1.38 per sheet. And the Saunders Waterford Fat Pad, size 7.5 by 11 inches, has 25 sheets and costs $31.31, which is $1.25 per sheet. But compared to your handmade spiral journals, here's what I figured out. This first journal, which I made with the Saunders Waterford paper, only cost about $13.50, including the cost of the cover pages and the sheet of watercolor paper, but it only holds 8 sheets, so it still averages $1.68 per page. No real savings here. I figured out that your best deal is to buy the 5-pack of Arches full sheets for $41.25. If you use this paper, it would only cost you $9.45 per handmade journal, averaging 92 cents per page. Now, even if I went with this option, I would need to make 8 journals like this to get a total of 64 sheets. That would cost me $75.60 in order to get about the same value as 4 regular Arches journals, which would cost $82.80, having a total of 60 sheets. But remember, that's not including the cost of the binding machine. So then I asked myself, well, what if I bought a whole roll of Arches paper? Yeah, did you know that you can buy watercolor paper in rolls? That's right. The Arches 140-pound cold pressed paper roll is 44.5 inches tall by 3 yards, and it does cost $219.39 from Jerry's Artorama. So quite an investment. You could cut out 216 7 by 10 inch sheets from this roll. Surely that would be cheaper. Well, not really. Each 7 by 10 inch page that you cut from that roll would cost $1.01 each, and you would probably need to purchase a mat cutter or something larger than scissors to cut up that much paper. So all in all, I mean, the math doesn't lie. The money you save making your own journals is pretty minimal. You'd have to fill a lot of watercolor journals before you'd see any kind of cost benefit from the purchase of your binding machine and supplies. I know the pre-made cotton watercolor journals might seem expensive, but for me, it's totally worth it to have high quality paper and a really nice binding all ready to go for me without having to measure, cut, and bind the pages myself. Now, maybe you really do enjoy the process of making your own journals, and if that's the case, you can't put a price on that, right? So if you do have some big pages of watercolor paper still lying around, here's my suggestion. Go ahead, cut them down to the size you want for a watercolor journal. And instead of investing in a binding machine, go to a local print shop like FedEx or Kinko's. FedEx will bind your pages for you for about $5. No binding machine required. Also, these things take up a lot of space. Friends, thanks for watching. This was a really fun experiment and I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment below. Tell me if you prefer buying your watercolor journals or do you prefer making them? I'd love to hear from you. If you haven't yet seen my video all about testing all the cotton watercolor journals on Amazon, click on that one next and I'll see you over there.